President Tinubu rings bell at Nasdaq, promises business-friendly environment.
Greatest economy is Nigeria. There's an immense opportunity in Nigeria that you can invest your money without fear.
And in a bid to walk the talk, the federal government promises to boost power generation and stabilize the national grid with a $20 billion investment plan. You're welcome. This is Business Insight on Souq News. I am Vivian Oguche. Now, to set the ball rolling, Alfreda Ambe Bassi is standing by with the day's top stories in the world of business.
Hello and welcome to Business Insight. I am Alfreda Ambe Bassi. We'll dive into the major business updates and market trends after this break. Thank you for staying with us. Nigeria's Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Mr. Dele Alake, unveiled at the United Nations General Assembly that Nigeria's solid mineral resources are valued at $700 billion. He stressed the nation's strategic importance in meeting global demand for critical minerals, essential for the transition to a low-carbon future driven by electric vehicles and renewable energy sources. To attract foreign investment, the government plans to offer compelling incentives, including capital allowances of up to 95% on qualifying capital expenditure, tax holidays spanning 3 to 5 years, and facilitating foreign currency transferability for mineral-related expenses. These measures aim to strengthen Nigeria's position as a key player in the global mineral market. And away from that, the Nigerian Postal Service, NIPOST, has experienced a decline in revenue as reported by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. Since 2019, their revenue has steadily decreased, hitting a low of 3 billion naira in 2022, a 17% drop from the previous year, and a 44% decline over 5 years. This decline is attributed to poor performance in various areas of NIPOST services. While NIPOST has undertaken various reform efforts, such as the establishment of subsidiaries and digital initiatives, a significant hurdle it faces is fierce competition from privately owned logistics companies operating in Nigeria. To address this, NIPOST plans to implement digital postcodes and an address verification system, AVS, as part of a revenue generation initiative aligning with Nigeria's digital transformation goals. And in a new development, hibiscus farming in Nigeria is experiencing a significant increase in popularity due to a remarkable 70% rise in hibiscus flower prices over the past 6 months, potentially leading to earnings of 48 billion naira from exports in 2023. This increase in profitability has caused farmers to shift their focus to hibiscus cultivation, with existing growers expanding their production areas. Hibiscus cultivation is prominent in states like Jigawa, Katsina, Bauchi, Kano, Maiduguri, Kebbi, and Sokoto, with Jigawa being the largest producing area. The versatile crop is used for various products, including the popular Zobo drink, and holds promise for Nigerian farmers in the international market. And moving on, Ghana is actively exploring the possibility of exporting electricity to its neighboring country, Nigeria, as part of its efforts to expand its power sector and achieve 100% universal energy access. Mr. Hansen Moni, head of the Generation and Transmission Unit of the Ghanaian Ministry of Energy, discussed this during a presentation at the Nigeria Energy Leadership Summit. Ghana has already made significant progress, reaching a 80% to 85% universal energy access within its borders through effective policy implementation. Ghana's proactive approach to energy access highlights the importance of continued investment and innovation in Africa's energy landscape, in contrast to Nigeria's recent power challenges. And in England, the Bank of England has decided to halt its series of interest rate hikes as the British economy experiences a slowdown. This decision comes in response to a recent drop in inflation, although the BOE emphasized that it does not take this reduction for granted. Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, emphasized that while inflation has risen, caution is required to ensure its return to normal levels. The BOE's decision to pause rate hikes follows a similar stance by the U.S. Federal Reserve and a recent rate hike by the European Central Bank. Up next is the stock, commodities and currency market trends after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. At the close of today's trading session on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, a total of 566,631,350 shares were traded in 8,201 deals. This corresponds to a market value of 5,386,238,398 naira and 73 kobo. Compared to the previous NGX trading day on Tuesday, yesterday's data shows a 16% decrease in trading volume, a 9% decrease in turnover, and a 7% increase in the number of deals. The current market capitalization of the Nigerian Stock Exchange stands at 37,400 billion naira. A total of 119 NGX listed equities participated in today's trading. Among them, 27 stocks recorded gains in their share price, while 29 stocks saw declines. Sunu Assurances Nigeria led the gainers with a 10% increase in its share price, closing at 0.88 naira per share. It was followed by Berger Pence, Wando and Chams. On the losing side, Transcorp Hotels experienced the most significant price decrease, ending the day with a 10% depreciation at 45.90 naira per share. It was followed by Ikeja Hotel, Consolidated Hallmark Insurance, and Secure Electronic Technology. Wando had the highest trading volume with 110 million shares traded, followed by Courtville Business Solutions, Chams, and Japol Gold and Ventures. In today's commodities market update, wheat exhibits resilience, maintaining a firm position at 579.75 US cents per bushel. The coveted precious metal gold commands a price of $1,919.79 US dollars per troy ounce. Silver retains its value, standing at $23.33 per troy ounce. Copper exhibits active trading with a current rate of $3.65 per pound. A significant player in the energy sector, Brent crude, holds steady at $94.05 per barrel. These figures encapsulate the present state of affairs in the global commodities market. It's a wrap on the news this morning. Vivian Oguche is seated pretty and ready to take you on the dynamic changes and innovations that have reshaped the nation's energy landscape. I am Alfreda Ambe-Basi. Keep watching Business Insight.
Okay, thank you, Alfreda. This is a business innings show, so he makes a comeback on Business Insight this morning. It's good to have you on Business Insight, Idahosa.
Vivian, my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. You look very Friday.
Oh, yes.
So there's been a lot of buzz about it. Okay, my producer just says I should call for a break, right? We never get tired of breaks here. We'll be right back after this short one. Stay with us. Welcome back. So we'll hit the ground running, right? But first, let's take a listen to President Tinubu as he rang the closing bell at Nasdaq on Wednesday.
It's a great honor for me to be here. I am happy to bring Nigeria to your doorsteps and honored that we are here today with a bubbling market that will evolve West African sub-region. The greatest economy is Nigeria. There's an immense opportunity in Nigeria that you can invest your money without fear. We've removed a lot of bottlenecks. We've cleared the oil subsidy that is corrupt, and we have also retooled the exchange rate to a reliable, dependable, one-figure floating of the exchange naira. You are free to take in your money and bring out your money. I count on you to invest in Nigeria. Take confidence in you.
Idausa, you remember not too long ago we referred to Dora Akunyili's efforts to rebrand Nigeria and how it failed. Do you think what the president is doing now might work? I mean, the former president of the NBA, Nigerian Bar Association, Agbakoba, said no African president has represented Africa on the foreign scene like this in a very, very long time. What's your take?
It's not just a very long time. And I think for the very, very first time, we're having an African president who is actually understanding what it is to run a nation. And I think this is the real conversation here, that the president is the #1 salesman for the continent and by implication for the nation. And this is why this particular visit is quite, very, very celebrated globally. The president understands that it's not just to go and fulfill our righteousness without attending international summit, but it's much more than that. That you really need to speak to the real issues. And the president had been doing this in the last 4 days. We saw him at the General Assemblies on Tuesday talking to the whole world that Africa is not a continent to be avoided, neither is it a continent to be pitied. All that Africa is crying for is just give us justice.
And a level playing ground.
And that's all. That's what he's saying. We're not begging. In short, as a matter of fact, we are the key to the wealth of the nations. And this was very clear. He's speaking out. And then we see him with the Secretary to the United Nations, Guterres, yesterday, telling him that the nations of the world, especially the developed nations and their multinational company, should not be hiding under human rights abuses to frustrate reform efforts in Africa. And these statements are very very enlightening and heartening for me as a person. Because this is what we have seen. That when you see an African leader trying to see how to galvanize and mobilize resources within his domain to steer the development of the continent or the nations in the continent, you see protests here and there. And when government is responding, they are accused of human rights violations and all the rest, and you get things really messed up. And I think he spoke to this while he was talking to them. We must understand that, look, we have reforms, and if there are reforms, you start a process, there's a pain, the birth pang had to come before the child is delivered. And this must not be seen as, abuse.
Yeah, which was what he was saying at Nasdaq on Tuesday. He said that there are reforms, ongoing reforms, but he's appealing to Nigerians to bear the pains. But in his words, he said we have removed the bottlenecks.
Yes.
And then he listed two very important ones. like the removal of subsidy,
Yeah.
and also the unification of
Exchange rate.
exchange
Yeah, the
rates.
floating rate.
Yes.
Now,
Which are
this is very important. You see, because what this means is that if you're calling people to come and do business with you, and you're a poor nation, and you're asking people to invest in your energy sector, oil and gas, and then, of course, you put a subsidy in there, which means, of course, the nation or the citizens will not be able to pay the right price for your product. And what that also means is that you have a government that is so poor who will not be able to pay the difference. So it does not make economic sense for anybody to come to invest. So what he's saying is that that was a bottleneck, that a lot of people look at it because every businessman is looking for profit. So if you are bringing in something to invest in an economy, and of course it's going to be regulated, and you are not given the right to price to a point you can make appropriate profits, then it will be discouraging.
Absolutely.
That has been removed. Now the floating exchange rate also determined that, you see, because this is actually to stimulate people bringing in capital into the country. Now that also had been made very easy. One floating exchange rate, then you can bring in your capital, and like he said to them at that stock exchange, you are free to bring in your money. You are also free to take it out. And this is also very fundamental. We cannot forget in a hurry the crisis in the aviation sector, where those foreign airlines are saying, oh, our money is stuck in Nigeria. Because they brought in investment, they can't take it out. And the president said, that era is over. Bring in your money. As long as I am on the saddle, you can bring it in, you can also take it out.
Yeah, but there's this very important issue I want us to address. So it seems that the president is very popular in the West, in other climes, and they say charity begins at home. How do we ensure that Nigerians understand the reforms, the long-term reforms the president is carrying out, so that these pains they're undergoing does not cloud their image?
Well, I think he has been using one particular metaphor in every conversation he has had, whether at home or even abroad, that Nigeria is one big house.
Oh, yes.
With different people living in different rooms. And we're under one roof. So we should not set the room, the house ablaze.
Because no house.
Oh, that is fundamental.
Nowhere for you to stay.
Yeah, because we know that a lot of people will be speaking to some issues that are whipping up sentiment along ethnic divide, religious divide, which really will not afford us to make some progress.
You remember the conversation we had earlier on, and you said that a nation is built along economic lines.
Yes.
And not ethnicity.
Ethnicity, yeah. Nobody take ethnicity to the market to buy food.
No.
We don't
If I'm buying Gary from you, I won't ask if you're a nigga.
Oh my God, yeah. We don't take religion to the market to go buy any cement to build a house. What people take to the market is cash and money. So, and that is what people are looking for. Not where you come from. As long as everybody is having the freedom to do business and make profit, and they are able to live a good life, it really don't matter where you come from. We don't enter an aircraft and be asking the nationality or the religion of who the pilot is.
No.
No, we don't. All we just care about is that we're looking for the comfort, the airline that provides us comfort and safety to where we're going. We're ready to fly. And I think that is what the president has been speaking to. So that we must understand that, yes, in the interim, there's going to be some pain. There's no reform that you will carry out. And that's why, of course, there's also an aspect and dimension which is trying to do himself is the change management that comes with reforms. So once you initiate some reform, some changes happen. It's going to affect some people positively, some people will be affected negatively. But it is the duty of the leader to see how to manage these changes such that the pain will not be for a very long time.
Okay, just to borrow or to learn from your analogy, Nigeria is the plane, President Tinubu is the pilot.
Oh, yes.
You feel safe in this plane?
Oh, I'm very safe.
The pilot is very sound.
The comfort is also very assuring.
Okay, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, the discussion continues. This is Business Insight, and stay with me. Welcome back. So we'll just smoothly delve into our main topic for today. We're talking about ongoing reforms in the power sector. And still with me on the show is Idahosa Osamanze. He is our in-house analyst, and we're going to be doing justice to this topic together. So the federal government has been laundering the nation's image abroad, and it seems to be selling. I can tell you that. We just took a look at the president's outing at the UN General Assembly, and also him ringing the bell, the closing bell at NASDAQ on Wednesday. Now, in a bid to walk the talk, the federal government promises to boost power generation and stabilize the national grid with a $20 billion investment plan. Also, if you are inviting investors into a country, if there's no stable power supply, it won't work, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the president, the federal government is working to ensure that there is stable power supply in Nigeria. What's your take?
Yeah, but I think the right thing to do. Energy is life. And there's no business that can make any profit if the energy mix are not right. So this is what the president is speaking to. And here we're looking at a president who is saying, oh, we want to attract so much more investment to come into this sector. And don't forget that before making this promise, he has actually already liberalized the sector. All the bottlenecks that will make these things not to work, they are all being removed now. Because if you know, before now, electricity was fairly and exclusively of the federal government. Now, state can invest in power. Private individual can invest in power. And this is the real route to go. Because we're looking at it, that if the federal government is having a lack of capacity to grow that sector, why monopolize it? And so what the president had done immediately he came into office was to use the executive order to say, look, you can generate power. Anybody can do it. We don't need to monopolize it and monopolize inefficiency. So let's see who is efficient so that people can actually generate their power. Imagine, for example, Kaduna is able to solve their power problem. All the factories want to go to Kaduna to make profit rather than move to Ghana. You see in the news we read just now, which is really ridiculous, that Ghana is planning to import power
to Nigeria.
That's looked insult.
I can't even wrap my head around it.
So this is what we really need to speak to. And you know, it's not that we there's a scarcity or dearth of reform in our climb. It's just because we have had an inept public service.
That's the problem, right?
And that's what the president has spoken to severally. That the problem is not about resources. The problem is not about idea. The problem is not about people. The problem has simply been we have not had good leadership and we have not had good management. That once you put these two mixed together, the leader who is setting the direction and those managers who will ensure that what the leader says he wants to do, that they achieve it, is done, is what will make any system to work. Now, when you take, for example, when Kennedy in 1963 said, oh, the dream of America before the end of the decade was to land a man on the moon and bring him down safely. Kennedy did not need to go to office to start to read new science. There were people who were working, and they were working at this. It's even reported that some journalists met a cleaner in the office and asked, what are you doing here? And the cleaner said, we are about to take a man to the moon and bring him back safely.
So the cleaner felt like a part of the team.
She understood the vision, and she felt and owned the vision, and was ready to work toward it. Now, but when you take a look at us, earlier in the day I made mention of the clip of Umahi inspecting the East-West Road and saying to us, the collusion between the civil servants and very wicked contractors in Nigeria who are even on the part of blackmail against government and the Minister of Works.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, let's do things well. So this has been the tragedy. And I think this is what the president, like he said yesterday, that his goal as the president of Nigeria is to ensure Nigerian work, and he doesn't mind how unpopular he will become in this direction.
You know, I'm wondering why you qualified contractors with the word wicked.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, wicked?
Oh, yes. You can imagine, take for example, we have been making Ibadan, Lagos Expressway
For ages.
in the last 23 years. That's wickedness. In the last 23 years, we have been fixing that road. They just hand it over. So which means if you fix the road today, before 4 years end, another regime come, he's still fixing the same road. And they are still using the same material. And they are still winning the contract. That's heartlessness. That's wickedness.
So let's take a look at other pitfalls that you would recommend this government should not fall into, apart from an ineffective civil service and wickedness, like you said. What are other pitfalls to watch out for when it comes to reform in the power sector? Because if you look at it, millions, billions have been, you know, buried into this sector, and, you know.
You know, this is what I say to people everywhere. Last year, I was having a conversation with a friend from India, and we were talking about power sector. And he was giving me a sample how Indian were able to overcome their challenge in the sector, how they were able to split the power sector into power generation, power transmission, and power distribution. And I said to him, India just did this. We have done our own years back. Now, why is our own not working? So it's not the policy. It's the people who are implementing the policies. And this is one of the issues that we have spoken to severally. When, of course, President Jonathan was going to sell off distribution to Disco, the whole idea was because PSCN was inefficient after we had changed their name from NEMPA to PHCN. And Nigerians said, oh, they became power holding and they were not making power to come. Then we said, oh, let's sell them to Disco. Now we have not danced anything since that time.
Oh, wow.
We are not dancing.
Oh, disco.
Yes, we are supposed
dancing.
to. There's no music playing, no dancing going on. Because discos have refused to actually invest in the sector. They're supposed to be distributors. Now, the facility we are still using is the same old NEPA facilities. We are not seeing any massive investment in that sector.
Yeah, what do you think?
They inherited the asset. They refused to take the liability. Now, this is a problem. So it's not about really you are having. Now, the question is, how did we really get into this agreement?
Absolutely, which is the question I was going to ask you. So you have said that the discos are not performing very well. How did they get there in the first place? The way the privatization was done. So how do you reverse it? How do you revoke the contract? Yeah,
but you see, this is a problem. And this is where what Umar said really made sense, and Nigeria need to reflect on this, which is the collusion between contractors or bidders and those in the public service. Who sells out the nation because of the things that they are going to get? So for me here, the real issue is value system. And I think what the current regime need to do, which of course is done everywhere, is to ensure that once people are caught with infractions, violating terms of contract, the government have to come hard on them.
Coming hard in your language will be what now?
You see, the sanction has to be so massive. Such people have to be blacklisted from doing public service or public jobs. Is when the government is hard and people see that the consequences of lawlessness, of violating the rules or terms of contract is hard, that they will run away from it. I used the analogy earlier on. Somebody said, oh, why is it that same Nigeria, when they leave Nigeria and they go elsewhere, they are behaving? They can only behave because they know that the sanction system, you have to pay dearly. The last time Sunday Elijah was speaking to us, he said, oh, when he got to Ukraine, they, as a student, they committed an offense. And then they were trying to plead. The offense initially was €10. The more they pleaded, the more fine they pay. So when they got to 50 euro, they had to stop. So this is what we need to do. That people need. Because the only thing that can exalt a nation, the only way prosperity can come from, is when, as a people, we are enforcing righteousness. It's important. And you see this rot everywhere in the public service. And we cannot be tired about saying this, because this is what is missing. If we can do our things well, and those who are negotiating on behalf of the nation, take the nation first, then you will see that deals will be made to benefit Nigeria. And I think that is where the president will need to watch. Because one of the booming industry in Africa and indeed Nigeria is sycophancy.
That's an industry?
It's an industry.
Wow.
And this is where he needs to really watch, to be sure that those who are with him are really with him in terms of moving Nigeria to where we should be.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the main source of power generation in Nigeria. What do you say to diversifying generation of power in the country, so it's not just from one main source? Maybe you should even speak to that. What caused true power generation in Nigeria?
Yeah, you see, I think largely we have relied on too much on one source of power generation, and we can speak about this enough. There are several sources where, of course, we can get power from. We can use gas, we can use coal, we can use water, we can use wind, we can use light. Now, all these are alternatives. And I think this is what other nations also are doing, and bringing so many sources into one basket. And then you are having enough to distribute. But you see, the challenge here, especially in terms of converting wind and sun energy into light, is the fact that it's quite more expensive than the conventional source of generation. And so there will be a need to work hard so that we are able to actually equalize the cost of conventional energy and these renewable sources that people are talking about today. Because if the value is too high, given the level of poverty that we experience, you may generate power and people will not be able to afford it. So affordability is also a problem. So apart from talking about accessibility, we must also be thinking affordability. Because if you're paying somebody, for example, minimum wage is 33,000. Now, if that is what you're paying as your minimum wage, and the cost of power is expensive, you know that majority of people who are living in that bracket will not be able to afford it. So we must be able to think in terms of how we can creatively and innovatively balance up so that the cost of generating renewable energy and this conventional source are at par. And I think some nations have been able to achieve this equivalence. So if we can do that, then the energy become available, it become accessible, and it's also affordable.
So you're speaking to catering to the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. Do we even have the middle class anymore in Nigeria?
Well, of course, like some said, it's only two classes God created, the poor and the rich.
Oh. Okay, fantastic. Now that you've taken us to the grassroots, let's take a look at some of the day-to-day issues. Now, apart from power generation, transmission, and distribution, you also take electricity, for example, where you have not just problems at the top, but problems with consumers too, who wouldn't pay their electricity bills. And then you also have problems with the regulators who would give you estimated bills and then hammer down on you at the end of the month. How do you address issues like this?
Oh yeah, the issue of estimated billing came, you know, like they said, since the hunters have started to shoot without missing, all the birds are flying without perching.
How do you get these things?
So this is what it is. A whole lot of people, and this again speaks to the value and ethics for life for us as a people. People are bypassing meters, connecting light directly.
And it's dangerous.
Yeah, but dangerous. But you see, what that means really is that you're not paying for the service. I have seen situations where people actually give money to some technicians to even have to manipulate their meters, not reading. So you, who is the provider of electricity, you come to a house last month to take a reading, and you come back this month, and the unit that has been consumed, and you know the quantum of light you have supplied is almost remaining at the same.
It's like magic, right?
Oh, yeah. So this is why you see that these people have to resort to estimated billing. But in some other places, you also find that, of course, meters are not easily available, which is, again, a fundamental problem.
Because I'm aware of lots of people who are asking for meters, but do not have
meters are not available. And because meters are not available, you find that, of course, people connect light into their house and they don't have access to meter. So you cannot actually measure the quantum of energy they consume. And so the only way to collect your revenue is to build them on estimates. Now, this situation we must have to address.
Absolutely.
Now the real issue is because this agency syndrome.
What's that now?
What I mean is this middleman syndrome. You see, you have a middleman between who is a producer and who is a consumer. And this is the real issue.
That's the bottleneck.
Oh, yes, because some people have been licensed to supply meters. And they don't have the capacity to supply meters. There are meters manufacturers.
Local?
Even internationally. If we don't have the capacity to build meters, I just feel that if discos can supply meters to people who are, let it become a precondition that if light must enter into your house, go and buy your meter.
Okay.
And put it in the open market. If it's a constraint.
Right.
So this is the real issue.
So you're saying deregularize the market.
Deregularize it. So because these agents who are in between are creating a rent-seeking environment. Because if you create an artificial scarcity and people are struggling, then people will be willing to pay rent. And I think this is something we must also pay attention to in the power sector. Because you see some people who are selling meters and they say because you have you don't have meters available, then people come from the back door, they are putting hands on the table, and then some things are happening, and some people are making private money at the expense of the rest of us. So this is issues that we must look at. And if this agreement with these agencies are working and they cannot make meters available, then they can import meters from China. Then we go to Alaba market and buy our meters to take light. And then, of course, they come to read it and be sure that nobody is tampering with some of all these things. Because people have money. Nobody is asking Disco, for example, to give them meter for free.
No.
So why should it become a problem? Some people pay for meter. 3 months, 4 months, they cannot have it. So if people are willing to pay for a service, or they are not even willing, if they are not willing to buy meter, and if it's available, then disconnect the light. So it becomes a precondition that we measure the energy we consume, because it's also important to planning. Because as it is now, we cannot actually determine what quantum of energy we need as a people.
That's not good.
Because it's not measured. So this is the things that, of course, the new regime must have to enforce. That, you know, of course, when the past minister, former past minister of Works and Fashola was there, he actually had made a law that, look, without metering, don't pay electricity bill. But it didn't work. It didn't work. Because we are still struggling with metering issue. And I don't see why that should become an issue.
It's not rocket science, right?
This is also where we are looking at the president as he's moving around the world, selling Nigeria, to see people who can also invest in that aspect of the value chain of energy supply, so that people can have access to meter. Accredited agents who are selling. If it's even to build factory here where it be manufactured, because the market for it will not end. So we can look at those areas and have critical investment in this value chain of energy and power supply, and I think a whole lot can really get better.
You know, there's something you said earlier on in another show, same station, where you said that Nigeria and Dubai, or the UAE, entered into partnership with a particular company at the same time. The UAE got what they wanted at a particular time, but Nigeria's, no delivery. I want you to speak to that, even as the president is beginning to invite investors into the country. What measures should be put in place? How do you make these investors know that we must get what we want when we want it?
You see, I cannot be tired talking about this comparison. And I think the president himself has spoken to it, which is the issue of the failure of leadership and management in the country. QED, that's our problem.
Okay. So you're saying micromanage?
Oh yeah. So what's the difference between UAE and Nigeria? Is this failure? Sometime 2 years ago, because the government is always thinking, in 2015, not 2 years, 2015, the UAE came up with a policy, and this is for public service, that the basis for promotion in public service is that you must contribute 2 ideas in a year that will make your work simpler.
Okay.
So, it's a HR policy. If you're a civil servant and you're working in the UAE and you cannot think of an idea, you're not just to give idea a name. You set the context for the idea, what it is, how it works. Give an example where it had worked before. What's the cost of putting this idea to work? And this makes the civil service become the think tank for the government of the UAE. Why? Because they are thinking of how do we make society better for citizens. Now here, you even have people with idea who can give it to you for free. Some people will still prefer to buy it and pay consultants so that they can get their kickback. So the real issue here is rent seeking. And once we can deal with the issue of rent seeking in this country, we have the potential of being the greatest nation on earth. Now, this is the fundamental. Righteousness exalts a nation.
You said that before.
Sin is a reproach to any people. If there's anything that is making us to be where we are, is the collective sinfulness, not of one single individual, but of majority of us.
You know, what I hear you say is kill corruption.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if you remember the administration that just left, at his inception, President Buhari said, if you don't kill, former President Buhari said, if you don't kill corruption, corruption will kill you.
Oh, yes.
Corruption almost killed him, right?
Of course, we are still struggling to survive the corruption.
Okay, as we wrap this up, you said, there's something you said that was very instructive. You must own this project called Nigeria.
Yes,
that's what you said. So how does the federal government bring the NLC, which is a huge representative of the people, on board? What you see is the NLC pitting against the federal government at all times. What can be done to ensure that these 2 players are on the same page?
Well, of course, then NLC had become a political arm.
Really?
As it were, yes, of course, because, you see, I expect that people who work, because there are also government workers in NLC, and they should understand the flow of capital to government business. And this, for me, is very critical. Because if you are really genuine, we know everybody is suffering. There are a mass of Nigerians who are on the street that are suffering. Nobody is actually agitating for them. All these things that you are saying put in place for us is only for a few people. How many percentage of these people are we talking about against those who are in the informal sector? Now, this is the real issue. Because I am asking myself a very simple question. We are talking about a government that is over-borrowing. Right? We are talking about inefficiency in the administration of subsidy on petroleum. And everybody, even including NLC, has said this is a scam. We have seen attempts by previous administration to revamp the refinery so that they can produce petrol. It has failed. We've seen that Dangote has built a refinery, which we are hopeful that by November we will start to see the product come to the market. Why is NSC with that guy in his hand, with a government that just come in, who is also doing and working hard round the clock on a daily basis to see how to remedy this past situation? So you cannot be negotiating with this regime on the basis of what you did with the past regime. Yes, we know that government is a continuum. But at the tail end or the twilight of that regime, you had agreed with the regime that they should take away subsidy by July. And this government came in May. Now, how do NSC expect that this regime fix the refinery in 3 months? It's a question for the NSC to answer. Do they wanted the government to renege on the agreement that the subsidy should end in July? This is a question. They have to answer that. You see, yes, we see it, and I think that's what the president has spoken to, that yes, it is biting for us. But I think that while they're also negotiating, they must also be showing government where the revenue is to be able to meet this demand. Take, for example, if the president wake up tomorrow and said, oh, our civil service is over bloated, let us cut down size, won't they go to the streets? They will go to the streets to protect themselves from being sacked. And yet you are asking government to carry so much load. You are not suggesting alternative funding where this money is going to come from to do this. On one breath, you are saying you want quality education, you want government to fund research, and you are saying on the other breath, don't increase school fees. So how does it work? How do you get the goal when we know that there is no resource in the nation? I said to people, now don't say, yes, we are rich in potential, but in terms of actuality, you can put it side by side. People talk about Qatar, people talk about UAE in terms of development, but look at it. The quota of OPEC to UAE is 3.3 million barrels per day for a population of 10 million people, both indigenous and non-indigenous. Whereas in Nigeria, by the last report we got, we are struggling to produce 1.6 barrels per day for a population of over 200 million people. I think people should just be rational. We don't put sentiment into this. So you know how much money that is coming to you. Like they say, you must learn to cut your coat according to your clothes, not your size.
Oh, cut your say it again.
Cut your coat according to your clothes, not according to your size.
Fantastic. You know, this station, Souq News, is a solutions-based station, right? And what you've just done is to tie up the two topics we had today, how you can make Nigeria work as the president sells the nation abroad, and also as the president tries to reform the power sector in Nigeria to make the environment friendly for investors. What's your last take? You got a few seconds as we try to push this through to an end. What's your last take, your final thoughts? My
thought is this: we should give the president the benefit of the doubt, allow him to drive reform. If you plant a corn today and harvest it tomorrow, of course, there will be no need for patience. But we know that if you plant a corn today, you will definitely wait for 3 months for it to produce a fruit.
So there's a time for maturation.
There's a time for waiting. And we must give the government the benefit of the doubt and trust hope one last time, and see whether we will get out of where we are to where we should be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Idahosa, for your perspective today. So I have been with Idahosa Osamanze, and we've been talking about the president's outing at NASDAQ on Wednesday, and also majorly actually reforms in Nigeria's power sector. That's our show. I am Vivian Uguche. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you had fun, why don't we keep it a date, same time, same station, on Monday. Until then, do have yourself a fantastic weekend. Bye.